So welcome to Jumbo IS and welcome to lecture number 6 of Geography and Environment in this lecture series called Prelims Powerplay 2026. In this lecture series, we will revise our entire syllabus of UPSC Prelims examination, the entire syllabus. It includes static portion as well as current affairs. Okay, you don't have to worry about monthly current affairs magazines or PT 365s, none of that. Just follow this lecture series and that would be enough. Everything would be covered in this lecture series. Now, to really get the benefit of this lecture series, you have to follow these 4 steps. The lecture would drop on YouTube at 9 p.m. Be consistent with the lectures, okay? Watch the lectures. Then we will share notes of the lecture. You have to memorize those notes. Otherwise, you'll forget whatever is covered in the lecture. Then, definitely, you will have some doubts. We will be putting you in our WhatsApp groups for which you have to just register. And you can ask your doubts in those WhatsApp groups anytime. Everything will be entertained. And last, along with this lecture series, you will get a test series. So be regular with the test. Now, as far as the lectures are concerned, the lectures would drop on YouTube 9 p.m. Be consistent with that. But for notes, for WhatsApp groups, and for tests, you would have to register on our website or on our app. Now, the link for registration is given in the comment section below. All you have to do is just click on that link and then register for it, and that would be all. If you're finding any difficulty as far as registering for this lecture series, well, there is also a number in the comment section. You just have to drop us a WhatsApp and we will guide you through the entire process, okay? So watch the lecture on time, but for the last 3 steps, notes, WhatsApp and test, register now. Because through this lecture series, you'll just have to spend 1 hour daily. That's it, just 1 hour from now till your prelims examination and everything would be covered, okay? Alright then, let's begin with today's discussion. Let's begin with today's lecture. And our today's topic of discussion is biosphere reserves. Okay, now biosphere reserves are almost every time in the news. Every year they are in news, and they were in news in the month of October for a very special reason. UNESCO has recognized another biosphere reserve from India. Okay, so what is this biosphere reserve that has been recognized? How many other biosphere reserves of India have been recognized by UNESCO? All these things would be covered in today's lecture. Okay, so without further introduction, without further ado, let's straight away jump into the lecture. Okay, so let's begin. So Geography, Environment, lecture number 6, Biosphere Reserves. Now, first of all, what are biosphere reserves? Now, pay close attention. Okay, now biosphere reserves are those geographic regions which are rich in biodiversity. Okay, they are rich in biodiversity, forests, animals, everything. Plus, they also have human settlements around those forested areas. Okay, so biosphere reserves have 2 features: rich biodiversity and human settlements that are living in harmony with the nature. Now, the purpose of designating these areas as biosphere reserves is twofold. Okay, listen to me very carefully. Now, once you declare a particular area as biosphere reserve, well, you have 2 purposes. Number 1 is conservation. Obviously, we want to conserve nature, we want to conserve forests, flora, fauna. And number 2 is, well, harmony between humans and nature. In these biosphere reserves, human beings are living in sync with nature. So you're basically demonstrating the idea of sustainable development, okay? Human beings are developing in these biosphere reserves, but they are in sync with nature. Unlike other protected areas like national parks, wildlife sanctuaries, the purpose is only one: conservation. But in biosphere reserves, you have an added function, okay? And that is show how human beings can live in sync with nature. So, through biosphere reserve, you are also targeting human development and environmental development. Clear? Make sense? Simple? So, these are biosphere reserves. Now, let's take a look at the definition, okay? So, biosphere reserves are areas with terrestrial or marine ecosystems, okay? Designated for conserving habitats, species, plant and animal species, and genetic diversity, okay? They serve as learning places for sustainable development, how humans can live in sync with nature, okay? Where interactions between humans and nature can be studied and managed. The reserve balances biodiversity conservation with sustainable use of natural resources by local population. This is very important. How nature can be conserved and how humans can use forest resources without depleting them. Okay. Purpose for these biosphere reserves is scientific research, environmental research, education, monitoring, capacity building for sustainable resource management. Okay. Now, every biosphere reserve, anywhere in the world, has 3 zones. This is very important for you to understand. So, zonation. So, let's take a look at this picture. Okay. So, if there is a biosphere reserve, it has an internal core area where no human activity is allowed. Then it has a buffer area where some very little human activity, research, scientific research, labs are set up. And then there is a transition area where human beings are living in sync with nature. They are performing sustainable agriculture, ecotourism, all these things are there. Okay. So every biosphere reserve has these 3 areas. Core zone, strictly protected area for conserving ecosystem species, genetic variation. No human or minimal human interference is allowed in this core area. Then there is a buffer zone. Adjoins or surrounds the core area activities compatible with conservation like environmental research, education, sustainable resource use, these are allowed. And then there is a transition area where people live, local population lives. Outermost area where sustainable economic and human activities such as agriculture, settlement, ecotourism, these are promoted. But only those activities are promoted in the transition area which are in sync with nature. Okay, they provide livelihoods to local population as well as they are in sync with nature. Okay, so these are the 3 zones. Every biosphere reserve, whether it's in India or anywhere in the world, has these 3 zones. Now, what is the importance of a biosphere reserve? Why do countries designate a particular area as a biosphere reserve? Significance. So, environmental significance, okay, protects entire ecosystems, biodiversity, okay, species, flora, fauna, everything is conserved. Then, biodiversity conservation, flora, fauna. Then, for scientific research, because generally scientific research happens in labs, but these biosphere reserves act like open labs, living laboratories for scientific research. Plus, you are conserving forests. So these forests absorb atmospheric carbon dioxide. So they are carbon sinks and very important for climate regulation. They prevent climate change. So these are the environmental benefits. Then what are the benefits for the people? Because we have to balance the interests of people along with the interests of nature. So socio-economic benefits. Sustainable livelihoods like ecotourism, agriculture, responsible forestry, they are encouraged in the transition area. Preserves indigenous community knowledge. Local tribal populations who have been living in sync with forests for centuries. Their indigenous knowledge, indigenous practices, they are conserved. Okay. Resolves development versus conservation debate. This is a huge debate. If you want to develop your country, you would have to pollute the environment, extract resources, cut down forests. This is a general understanding, right? If you have to develop, you have to do this. But if you want to conserve nature, then development is going to get sacrificed. Biosphere reserves prove that you can balance human development with environment. Okay? Resolves development versus conservation debate. Okay? Then these areas also act as areas of environmental education, environmental awareness among people, scientific research, all these things happen. Plus, through these biosphere reserves, India is able to fulfill its international commitments like Convention on Biodiversity, UNFCCC, Paris commitments. Plus, India also runs various national programs like Project Elephant, Project Tiger, Project Cheetah. All these things require nature conservation, conservation of nature, right? So this helps in that also. It allows India to achieve its international commitments as well as national commitments. Clear? Make sense? So this is the significance. Now here's the thing. Well, internationally, there is a program launched by United Nations, okay, for biosphere reserves. Making biosphere reserves is an international program. And what is that program? And how many biosphere reserves from India are in that international program? We have to talk about this, okay? Now, the United Nations organization which is responsible for biosphere reserves is UNESCO. Okay, And UNESCO has launched a program called Man and Biosphere Reserve Program. Okay, how man can live in sync with biospheres. Yes, so let's talk about UNESCO's MAB program. So UNESCO's MAB, Man and Biosphere Reserve. Clear? Now about MAB. So it is an intergovernmental scientific initiative launched by UNESCO in 1971 that promotes a harmonious relationship between humans and environment. Okay. Now under MAB, there is a network, international network of biosphere reserves. Okay. Every country has certain biosphere reserves. These biosphere reserves are recognized by MAB as biospheres of international importance. And then there is a network, global network of these biosphere reserves is created so that different countries can learn from each other. Okay. So under MAB, World Network of Biosphere Reserves was established in 1976. Okay. 13 biosphere reserves from India are part of this world network. The network promotes synergies between human societies and natural ecosystem, facilitating sustainable development. It enhances knowledge sharing. Indian biosphere reserves can learn from Brazilian biosphere reserves because both of them are part of this world network. Capacity building, sustainable livelihoods while conserving biodiversity and cultural heritage. Okay, now some more information about MAB. As of April 2024, the network includes 759 biosphere reserves across 136 countries, covering 5% of Earth's surface and supporting 260 million people worldwide. Okay, so total international biosphere reserves are 759, of which 13 are from India. Okay, all right. Now let's talk about this network, World Network of Biosphere Reserves. You know, India has a total of 18 biosphere reserves. But out of those 18, 13 are selected for this world network. Okay. Now, how are biosphere reserves selected for this world network? You need to know the entire process. So here's the process of designation. So who recognizes whether this biosphere reserve should be part of this world network? Well, Director General of UNESCO, following the decision of MAB International Coordinating Council. So MAB International Coordinating Council decides, it advises DG of UNESCO, and DG of UNESCO then designates it. Okay. But MAB ICC receives proposals from individual countries. Okay. So sites can be proposed by all member states or associate members of UNESCO. So for example, India will propose that Nanda Devi National Park should be designated as a biosphere reserve. It will send a proposal to MAB ICC. MAB ICC will check it, see whether it fulfills all the criteria, and then advise DG. Okay. Now, once a particular biosphere reserve is part of this world network, then it has to follow some rules and regulations. Okay. UNESCO sets apart certain rules and regulations which have to be followed by every country which has biosphere reserves which are part of world network. Okay. Now, what is the legal framework? What are those rules and regulations? So there is this set of rules and regulations known as Sevilla Strategy. Okay. Sevilla Strategy was adopted in 1995 alongside statutory framework of the World Network of Biosphere Reserves. This provides a legal framework. Okay. So Sevilla Strategy, which is part of statutory framework of World Network of Biosphere Reserves, this gives you the set of rules and regulations. You remember we talked about that every biosphere reserve should have a core area, buffer area, transition area, right? This is mentioned in these rules. No biosphere reserve can do without these three things because it is mentioned in these rules. Okay. Now, once a particular site is part of this world network, then it has to do the following. After designation, the sites remain under sovereign jurisdiction. So it doesn't mean that once India's biosphere reserve is recognized, then UNESCO will manage it. No, India will manage it. But India has to follow the rules given by UNESCO. Okay. States can also remove. So India can also remove a biosphere reserve from the network by notifying to MAB Secretariat. So if India wants, India can remove a biosphere reserve also or send a proposal. UNESCO can also withdraw designation if a reserve fails to meet the required standards. Okay, UNESCO can also say, this doesn't meet our standards, we are removing it. Plus, every 10 years, a recheck is done, whether a particular biosphere reserve is following the criteria properly or not. Clear? So this is all you need to know as far as Man and Biosphere Reserve Program is concerned. Again, UNESCO did it, and the idea behind that was sustainable development. Conserve nature, enhance human development. Both of them should be in sync with each other. That was the idea. Okay. Now let's focus on biosphere reserves in India. Okay. The reason why we are discussing biosphere reserves is that up till September, there were 12 biosphere reserves from India which were part of UNESCO. But recently, a 13th biosphere reserve has been added, Cold Desert of Himachal Pradesh. Okay. Cold Desert National Park. So it has been added as the 13th biosphere reserve in this world network. Okay. That is why biosphere reserves were in the news, and it is important for us to know. Okay. So now let's talk about biosphere reserves of India, in India. Okay. So biosphere reserves in India. So in India has 18 biosphere reserves that are ecologically significant, are designated for conservation and sustainable development. So India has designated these 18 areas as biosphere reserves, but UNESCO has only recognized 13 as a part of their world network. So remember this thing. Okay. Now here are these biosphere reserves. Okay. So this Cold Desert has been recently included, but these are India's biosphere reserves. As you can see, they cover every geography of India: mountains, islands, coastal plains, everything. It includes terrestrial ecosystems, marine ecosystems, wetlands, everything. Okay. Important facts. Nilgiri Biosphere Reserve, this one. This was the first biosphere reserve that was recognized by UNESCO in 2000. Okay, so remember this fact. Nilgiri Biosphere Reserve was the first in India to be internationally recognized by UNESCO in 2000. Indian biosphere reserves cover a variety of biogeographical zones from Western Ghats to Himalayas to Sundarbans to islands of Andaman and Nicobar. Several of these reserves are key sites for tiger conservation. Many biosphere reserves are important for tiger conservation and many other animals, climate regulation and ecological research. Again, the idea of biosphere reserves is balance biodiversity conservation with sustainable livelihood opportunities for local population and the local tribals of that region, which have been living with these forests, in sync with these forests for centuries. Okay. All right. Now, you know that these biosphere reserves have to be protected. Okay. Now, India has to follow the rules and regulations mentioned by UNESCO's MAP program. But in India, there has to be a legal framework. So, which laws of India basically allow protection of these biosphere reserves? Basically, these biosphere reserves are protected under which laws of India? Okay. So, let's talk about the legal framework within India. Now, this legal framework is in sync with UNESCO, but there has to be a legal framework in India. Okay. So, for conservation of species, plant and animal species, there is Wildlife Protection Act. For conservation of forests and other things, Environmental Protection Act. Then, can you use forest resources? How many forest resources can you use? Can you cut down some trees or many trees? All these rules and regulations come under Forest Conservation Act. And Preservation of Flora and Fauna, Biological Diversity Act. So these are the 4 laws that govern biosphere reserves. So this is the legal framework. But which organizations of India implement this strategy? Okay, what is the institutional framework? Who implements these laws? So at the top, at the union level, there is Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. It is the nodal agency for biosphere reserves. Then states also perform a role. States propose biosphere reserves. For example, Andhra Pradesh identifies a particular area and they say this should be a biosphere reserve. They will send a proposal to Ministry of Environment, which after doing its own checking, will send the proposal to UNESCO for international recognition. So states have this role. Then there are other bodies also like National Biodiversity Action Plan, and every state has state biodiversity boards. They also contribute towards governance of these biosphere reserves. So this is the institutional framework. Remember this. Okay. And yeah, that's about it. That's all you need to know as far as biosphere reserves. But yes, one more thing. The thing is that the reason why we are discussing biosphere reserves is because recently UNESCO recognized Cold Desert Biosphere Reserve as the 13th biosphere reserve. So you need to have some information about this also. Now this information, all the important information with respect to Cold Desert Biosphere Reserve is given in your notes. Okay. Do check it out because a question can be asked in your prelims examination this time. So all the information that we have discussed, plus some more information, is given in your notes. Memorize that information. There is a very high chance that they might ask a question related to biosphere reserves, especially cold desert biosphere reserves. So do memorize your notes. It's very important. And then if you have any doubts, well, you are in these WhatsApp groups, ask your doubts. All right? And be regular with the tests. Okay then. With that, we conclude today's lecture. So thank you so much for watching, everyone. And I'm sure it has added value to your preparation. But it will add more value if you're consistent with the lectures, you memorize the notes regularly, you ask your doubts, and you are regular with the tests. Follow these 4 golden steps. It's very important. All right then. That would be all. And I shall see you next time with another topic in this lecture series called Prelims Powerplay. Thank you, everyone.